Hello everybody, welcome back to OMB Reviews. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope you're doing well, and today we're doing a box office preview for this upcoming weekend, which sees my most anticipated film of the year, John Wick Chapter 4, set to come out. And according to Deadline, how many times have we seen headlines for this in any franchise film? It's saying it's targeting a franchise record, $115 million global. Now, what I can say is that they actually might finally be correct for once in the domestic opening, because the movie, again, when you actually properly adjust for inflation and look at what the average ticket sales would have been, you're looking at this film actually being able to do that, but it's not by as much as they would have you believe, because, again, they are using numbers that are not actually adjusted. So I've done the math for y'all. We already talked about this a little bit on Tuesday night stream, but now that we finally got some closer to release updated numbers, we've got an interesting report coming from Deadline of the film making somewhere between 65 and 70 domestic, whereas Box Office Pro, which again, sometimes is on the mark when it overextends, sometimes it's off the mark, is projecting the film to make somewhere around 74.3 million on average. We, of course, will have to wait and see. Based on early reports, it sounds like the film will probably end up making a higher end result, and I would not be surprised to see it go towards the higher end of the Deadline number and maybe even a little bit past that. Before we go any further, though, please make sure you smash that like button, lap that fire button if you're watching over on Odyssey, and smash the rumble button as well. Also, make sure that you are subscribed to the channel with the bell notification on. That way you know every time a video or live stream goes live on the channel. So John Wick Chapter 4, I've got my ticket to go see this film tonight in IMAX, and I am very excited. I've been a big fan of the John Wick franchise ever since the very beginning. And one thing that I've noted in even just previous years about the John Wick franchise is that it has continuously and consistently doubled its box office, not only in its opening weekend numbers, but also in its overall totals. And that is something that I think we're not going to see this time around, if these early numbers, of course, are accurate. If the film overperforms, then we're in a whole new ballpark. And as I mentioned previously, I've heard some really good things about the film, and so word of mouth could very much help this film end up being the actual highest grossing film of the franchise. But as you all know, even if a film is something that I'm excited to go see, or a film that I like is in the picture, I'm still going to treat it fairly because the numbers are what they are. And if inflation continues to trigger you, I don't apologize. But going just based off of the numbers here, it's saying that the $115 million global opening for John Wick is a franchise record. Now, I don't have all of the other international worldwide number box offices or their adjustment for inflation. And so what I can say is that I would not be surprised if that number was actually not completely accurate. Again, it wouldn't surprise me if it was, because I know the domestic number is leaning towards the highest. But again, we know the history that Deadline has of just ignoring those bits of information that are kind of important, because you can't just compare 2010 and 2014, or in this case, 2014 and 2019 numbers to that of 2023. The value of the dollar has changed quite a bit, and the average ticket price has changed quite a bit as well, which is why I've decided to break it down in a chart, just to show you why, one, adjustment for inflation is important, and two, why now I'm starting to focus on overall average ticket sales, estimated ticket sales as well. But when it comes to the actual domestic, as you can see, they're projecting the film to make somewhere between $65 and $70 million. Compare that to Box Office Pro, who are projecting the film to make somewhere around $74.3 million, and their overall range is that the film will make somewhere between 67 and 82. Now, this is once again another increase in their overall projection. Their last average for what they had over on March 17th, their average was actually around 66.5 million. So as you can see, it's actually gone up quite a bit, showing that there is a lot of clear indications, at least to people like Box Office Pro, that the film is trending towards being an incredibly successful movie. All the while you have films like Shazam, which is dropping like a fly, had an abysmal opening weekend, and based on the fact that after 2 weeks it's only going to be at $51 million, has probably no chance of getting to $100 million domestic. Let's talk about these ticket sales, because that, of course, is something that I think is incredibly important to do. Now, let's go ahead and look at these numbers. So when you have these numbers, all right, the opening weekend, domestic opening weekend for John Wick in 2014, when you adjust the numbers for inflation, right, because the actual number was around $14.4 million opening. So again, the film itself actually didn't make a whole lot of money. It was brand new on the scene. No one really knew about it, but because it was able to get such positive word of mouth, it was able to do better than had been expected. And of course, when it came out on Blu-ray, everyone started to say, hey, you need to see this movie. Hey, here's a copy of the film. Hey, I'm going to buy you a copy of this movie. Watch it. And of course, it began to grow so tremendously that it doubled its numbers. And so we can see that in both ticket sales sales and also in total box office. So again, you look to the numbers here for the domestic opening of John Wick 2014. When you adjust those numbers, it's $18 million. When you look at John Wick Chapter 2 in 2017, that film opened to around $30.4 million. So again, about almost doubling that of the original. And so when you adjust the numbers for inflation, it's actually $37.4 million, because a dollar today was worth $1.23 back in 2017. A dollar today was worth $1.27. And hopefully you can see why inflation is such an important factor to put in, as well as the ticket sales, which we'll get into in a second. And then between that, so you already doubled your audience, right? You already doubled your overall gross even when you adjust for inflation. Then you get to John Wick 3 in 2019, and you see a massive $66.4 million opening weekend. And again, a ticket today or a dollar today was worth $1.17, even just back in 2019. Shows you just, again, the value of the dollar and how much it's changed. And you can see, though, it still is roughly a doubling of the entire amount of money. Now, the reason why this is important is because what they're doing over on Deadline is they're saying, hey, this film is expected to open to $65 to $70 million, but the unadjusted numbers for John Wick 3 are 56.8. So yeah, that's a pretty easy number for this film to beat, because I guarantee you that 65 to 70 is a more conservative estimate. Deadline tends to put out those industry numbers, which tend to be on the more conservative side, because studios don't want to be so off that it's an embarrassment. So they will hold back a little bit so that when it does better than what they said they are expecting, it ends up making them look better and get better headlines for it. But let's go ahead and go back to the old average. This is the old average from Box Office Pro. With the old average of 66.5, and again, all the numbers have gone up since then, whether you take the average of the 65 to 70 from Deadline or the new average coming from Box Office Pro of 74.3, what you'll notice here is that, guess what? That would technically be the highest grossing of all the John Wick movies. So, hey, guess what? You finally got it right, Deadline. You finally got it right. When you actually have apples to apples comparisons, when you actually compare these films accurately, you're getting that number. In addition, go ahead and look at what we have here when we compare this to the average ticket sales. The first film's opening weekend domestically sold about 1.7 million tickets. How do I get this? Average ticket price during the time of the first John Wick film was around $8.17. Of course, I adjust that number for inflation because I'm basing it off of this number adjusted for inflation. So it sold around 1.7 million tickets. Look at John Wick Chapter 2. 3.3 million tickets. So again, a doubling of the overall tickets. And that's with the average ticket price going up to $8.97. Jump ahead to 2019, and the average ticket price went up again to $9. And still, you're seeing a doubling of the overall ticket sales to 6.3. You look at the overall projections, and even at the lowest end average, right? And this was, again, the average from March 17th. You're still seeing this film is projected to sell more tickets. But I want to bring this up because, hey, I got to be fair, right? If I'm going to talk about Creed, if I'm going to talk about Shazam, if I'm going to talk about other films that I was not a big fan of, and people are going to say, oh yeah, you don't never mention this stuff with movies that you like. Well, I haven't seen this movie yet, so I can't say whether I like it or not, but I can say I really enjoy the franchise. I also like the first Shazam film, but that's besides the point. John Wick Chapter 4, though, is indeed projected to be the highest grossing opening weekend, at least domestically, I can confirm. And not only that, but also to have the highest ticket sales. Now, also, again, big caveat is when it comes to these numbers, these are estimates, right? This is based off of the average ticket price for the given year, which means that for the individual film's opening weekend, the average ticket price probably is a little bit higher because a lot of people probably are going to see this film in IMAX. And as the years go by, there's more IMAX screens, there's more PLF, premium format screens, and because of that, you probably see a less overall ticket sales. The fact, though, is they were able to double their audience. The reason why this is significant is because John Wick 4 is looking to be the first time in the franchise history where it does not double its domestic opening and where it does not double its domestic overall ticket sale opening either. Now, that's not a terrible thing. Again, these films aren't really made for a whole lot of money. And so based off of the early numbers, it seems like this movie is going to be just fine. It's going to be able to make its money back probably and be able to make some profit to boot. But it does show that there has been a break between John Wick 3 and 4. Now, there could be a couple of reasons why this is the case. Right, some people maybe think, hey, I really like John Wick 1, John Wick 2 was fine, and then John Wick 3 had really great action sequences, but the story wasn't nearly as strong as the first two films. Could also be the fact that maybe, again, sometimes you have franchise fatigue setting in. I think the bigger reason, though, is because you're still dealing with, even now in 2023, people whose habits have been broken, right? People who are very careful with how they spend their money. And that's why I think the actual numbers for the weekend are probably going to be a lot higher than what Deadline is reporting and could even be as high or even higher than what Box Office Pro is reporting, because if the word of mouth is good, and right now, a lot of the early reviews, I have not really seen a single early review in the negative from just general people, let alone from so-called professional critics. I think what you're ultimately going to end up seeing is the film doing much better than expected, and in the long run end up being potentially the highest grossing of the franchise. But I will be following those numbers, and I will of course have the final numbers all compared with one another using the proper adjustments for inflation to give a fair apples to apples comparison, and also having those average ticket sales as a part of the discussion as well. But what are y'all's thoughts about John Wick Chapter 4? Do you think it's going to make the $66.5 million? Again, that's the old average. So right now we're looking at the average projected by Box Office Pro is 74.3, and right now they're projecting 65 to 70 million in deadline. Again, I think this number is them lowballing it. Again, this is something that's very common because when the film does better than expected, and a lot of people are expecting this film to do a lot better than expected because of the hype surrounding the film. There have not been a lot of movies that have had a lot of hype around them. So what are your thoughts about that? Also, I think it's just hilarious the fact that this film in the fourth in the franchise, and again, not necessarily a common household name in John Wick. I mean, I would say versus a company like DC, a company like Warner Brothers having a film like Shazam, the fact that that film only made 30 million in its second, its second outing opening weekend. Yeah. Definitely not a good look for them. And as you can see, Shazam is projected to drop around 54% according to Box Office Pro. So abysmal numbers here for Shazam. And we'll, of course, follow that and all the other films that we've been tracking here as well. But let me know your thoughts about this and anything else I mentioned in the comment section down below. If you like this video, smash that like button, like that fire button, Aussie, and smash the rumble button. You're all amazing and beautiful people. Hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, God bless. And now for a huge shout out to all of my March Patreon, Subscribe Star, and local members at the Keeper of the Bifrost level and above. Starting off with Father Luca Illich, Garrett Searles, Chris from the 80s, who you can check out over his YouTube channel by the same name, Jaimir Irie Hymason, Joe Horn, Jonathan Carney, Orange at Reviews, you can check out over at his YouTube channel, Laura, the Modern Major General Story, Rosetta Allen, who you can check out at her YouTube channel, Eagle Rider, Miss Martin Muses, and you can check her out at her YouTube channel by the same name also. To my Subscribe Star members, Matt317, you can check out over at his Twitch channel, Matt317, Fast Reaction, The R, Mr. Roy, J-Rod, the Beer Guru, and ZK Man, who you can find out over at xtheboundaries.co. And lastly, to my locals members, Miss Minnesota Hockey Fan, How About a Hockey Player, J.H. Schwalbach, Brett D90, and the amazing lawyer, Robert Barnes. Thank you all very much for supporting me at the Patreon level, Subscribe Star level, and locals level of Keeper the Bifrost and above. If you want your name shouted out at the end of every live stream and every video, make sure to check out the top link in the video description to find out more ways that you can support the channel, including ways to get access to a podcast and also ways to get access to giveaways that I do on the channel, and also, of course, to my coveted Chosen of Valhalla level as well. You guys are all amazing and beautiful people. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and as always, God bless.